Hey, spooky friends, and welcome to the Three Twisted Sisters, hosted by Britt.
Kay and Lexi.
And on today's episode, we are going to be discussing monsters and lore. Now,
Yes.
if you are streaming over on our YouTube channel, which is Three Twisted Sisters Podcast, you will see that we are in costume as our specific monsters and lore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I actually woke up like this today, so.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a skin treatment too.
Mhm.
Mine is actually it's based on a real life monster, and her name was Elizabeth Bathory, and she's known as the Blood Countess.
Yuck.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yucky. I am doing my best to embody a skinwalker, Got the kind of passing on like the, what is it, like a Winnedago? Winnedago. What is it
Right?
called?
That's right.
Okay. What
Winnebago,
am I?
the RVs.
Right. Yes. So I am embodying a skinwalker.
How about you, Lexi?
I am a vampire.
Nice.
There.
Mm.
So, our monsters. So, we all three picked specific monsters and are going to tell you guys their tale, their history, their background, if you will. And who would like to go first?
Why don't you, Lizzie?
Okay. Alrighty. So, like I said, my monster is based on a real person. The Blood Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Now, this infamous Hungarian countess, whose crimes inspired the story of Dracula, Queen of the Damned, and one of my guilty pleasure movies, Stay Alive. But let's a little bit in who actually was she. So on August 7th, 1560, Elizabeth Bathory was born at her family's estate in Royal Hungary. Both Elizabeth's parents, Baron George Bathory VI and Anne Bathory, came from very prominent and potentially incestuous families. Back then, a lot of the royal families would breed, breed, would link together to keep their bloodline pure. And it's something that we've heard a lot across human culture in general. I kind of relate to the legend and the lore around Elizabeth as kind of like a female version of Joffrey from Game of Thrones. Very much so. So, like I said, she was born into a royal family with very high standing. For instance, on her father's side, one of her uncles was the Voivode of Transylvania, which basically meant he was like the highest reigning official of Transylvania. And on the other was the Prince of Transylvania turned King of Poland. And her eldest brother actually became the royal judge of Transylvania. So they have a lot of nobility, a lot of wealth, high ranking society life. Now, growing up as a noble woman with extreme wealth and privilege, Elizabeth was incredibly educated and well spoken for. She actually was fluent in 4 languages: Hungarian, Latin, Greek, and German. And as a child, Elizabeth was actually diagnosed with what they called back then the falling sickness, or modern day epilepsy. Now, the course of treatment for this particular disease at the time was to take the blood of a non epileptic and rub the blood on the afflicted's lips. Now, kind of, in my opinion, sparks a little bit of the legend, the lore, the potentially true crimes that she committed later on in her life. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And at this time, it was actually her family's servant's blood that they would use. So it wasn't anybody like within her family. It wasn't like her mother. It was servant blood. And throughout her privileged life, Elizabeth witnessed abuse and torturous accounts against the servants and peasants her family oversaw. Um, Back then, there was not any sort of law protecting lower class or workers, things like that. No sort of protection for them. So people with high standing really had free will when it came to how they treated other people. There within this story, there are a lot of rumors, a lot of witness accounts, things like that that don't have a like that I want to say girth. I know you hate that word. I don't know why I always think of that
It's a
word.
great word.
They right. They don't have a lot of credible standing. So I will be saying rumor has it and things like that throughout this story. But it is rumored that she actually witnessed a common thief in her family's village, um, who, for punishment, was actually sewn within the belly of a horse. And she actually, it is recorded within this rumor that she laughed at the sight of it. So, like I said, kind of like the Joffrey vibe, the incestuous kind of cray cray vibe. Think of that. Um,
Question. So when
yes,
you say they sewed him into the belly of a horse, like they opened the horse up and they put him in there
yeah, basically.
and then they sewed him back up. Was he
Hmm.
dead already or did he
He was alive,
and then
supposedly.
he died in the belly?
Must have, yeah,
Ew.
yeah,
What kind of punishment is that?
exactly.
Ugh.
Ex-
Yeah, that's disturbing.
yes. So, by the age of 11, Elizabeth was actually betrothed to marry Count Fernez Nadisty. And I apologize for my English pronunciation. I'm going to call him Fern through this just to make it a little bit easier. Fern. For political reasons, financial reasons, royal problems, that kind of stuff. Because royalty. Um, Now, by the age of 13, it is rumored, another rumor, that she had fallen pregnant with a peasant boy's child. Now, the child itself was supposedly given to another prominent family and raised away from Elizabeth. But Fern was not very thrilled about this. And the kind of whisperings about what happened was that supposedly he castrated the peasant boy in front of Elizabeth and then fed his body to a group of wild dogs. And she witnessed all of this. So after this event, rumored event again, 2 years later, they were both married. Thanks to the political drive and wealth behind their linking, the two inherited a now historical castle of, sorry for my pronunciation, Sesji, and the 17 villages around it to reign. Um, Fast forward a couple more years, Count Fern became commander of the Hungarian troops, leading war against the Ottoman Empire, while Elizabeth managed the business side of things, for example, villages, as well as family matters. Um, Now, the Ottoman, just to give a little bit background, the Ottoman Empire waged war against and across Europe, namely Hungary in this story, pillaging, raping, enslaving, and killing any who opposed them. And Elizabeth is actually on record for intervening when several women had fallen prey and were abducted by the Ottoman, while Furnick, I'm sorry. Meanwhile, Furnick coined the nickname the Black Knight of Hungary for his love of killing the other opponents. So the Count actually had incredibly inventive ways of torture and killing of said enemy, only to come home and share those methods and teach them to Elizabeth. Although the exact number of children between the couple is unclear, with undocumented miscarriages, stillborns, infant deaths, things like that. But the couple had 5 confirmed children together, 3 girls and 2 boys. Fast forward a bit to 1604. Furnick had been suffering from an unknown disease that seemed to have attacked his legs, leaving him permanently disabled until his death. Remember this name. He left the care and protection of his widow and heirs to Gorgi Thurzo. Gorgi Thurzo. So sorry about that pronunciation. Let me double check that it's.
I can't believe you don't know how to speak Hungarian, Brittany.
I'm like, I don't want to say it wrong. In my head, I see Georgie, but that's definitely not it. So Georgie actually was left to look after Elizabeth and their 5 children when the Count passed. At this time, rumors and accusations had increased about this mysterious countess. As I said before, throughout her life, she was witness to a lot of barbaric treatments and partook in many herself. But due to her high standing in nobility, many villagers and semi-high class women were eager to either work for the Countess with the promise of larger salaries, higher wages, a little bit more of a bump in their social standing. Many noble women below her class rank, I guess I would say, were actually sent to her for proper training in her gymnasium. Unfortunately, hundreds of teenage girls happened to die in her care. Suspicions were growing, odd markings or disfigurements were found and discovered on the bodies of the deceased girls, and family members of the missing or dead were beginning to gain notice from officials. So, as I said, accusations were definitely increasing, but these crimes and rumors and things like that had already been swirling around the Countess for several years. So let's back up to when Furnick was away at war doing his Black Knight of Hungary stuff. It is reported that Elizabeth met a sadistic woman, a witch, named Anna Dervulia, who apparently introduced her to a more sadistic, satanic ritual, including the thought of bathing in virgin blood for prolonged youth and vibrancy, coining the name the Blood Countess. Now, what's interesting about this is throughout all of the accusations, all of the witness testimony, there actually was not one word or one claim that she had actually bathed in the blood of her victims. This rumor, this legend actually came to fruition about 100 years after her passing. So keep that in mind. Alrighty, so not only was Elizabeth fond of torture, and she had witnessed so much barbaric treatment throughout her life and inflicted some herself. Reportedly, she would strip down servant girls, cover them in honey, only to leave them outside for bugs and vermin to devour. Now, this reportedly, rumor has it, she learned this particular torture method from her husband. She also enjoyed stripping down servant girls and putting them outside, watching them freeze to death during the cold winter months. And not to mention her gymnasium for training these noble women who would go to her to learn the ways of society was actually multiple rooms torture chamber. Multiple rooms with plenty of sadistic devices for the time. It is reported later by one of her servant sidekicks, because she had 4 who worked with her primarily, that I'm going to go ahead and list the accusations of her torture and her crimes. So it is reported that she would starve the girls, that she would cut her victims with knives, shears, thin razors, or pins, that she would bite off pieces of their flesh, that she would burn her victims, small parts on their bodies, or especially their genitals, I mean. Basically full mutilation and disfigurement. And of course, the rumor that she bathed in their blood. So pretty much any diabolical punishment or nightmarish torture device was accessible back then, she most likely used within those chambers. Now, regardless of how many young girls, and I'm saying like teenage girls, were disappearing from local villages, like I said, she oversaw 14 of them. And these teen girls were, like, the numbers were astounding to how many that had gone missing. But the tipping point for her downfall, and what really alerted authorities and actually the king of Transylvania himself, was when a young noblewoman mysteriously died under her care. Now, Elizabeth told the family that the girl had simply committed suicide. A lie, I would say. Absolutely, because it was extremely sketchy circumstances, to say the least. Now we're going to go back to Mr. Yorgi Thurzo, the man who the Black Knight of Hungary entrusted his wife and children to. Heard of these accusations, and after gathering enough testimony from local villages, from the noble families who sent their daughters to her, after collecting all of this quote unquote evidence, he arrived at Elizabeth's castle in 1610, and supposedly he could hear screams from her chambers underneath the castle. And he found 2 to 3. The numbers are some sources said 2, others said 3. So I'm going to say 2 or 3. Unfortunate victims of the Countess. The body of a deceased teenage girl, and 1 or 2 wounded but alive victims within her torture chambers. Trying to keep the allegations and these findings very hush-hush, because she was one of the most powerful women in Hungary at this time. She was placed on house arrest, awaiting trial, and 4, like I said, her 4 loyal servants, or her accomplices, were arrested. And during this time, everybody within the castle was interrogated, but these four were heavily interrogated. You could say under duress because they were themselves tortured for answers. One loyal servant provided authorities with a handwritten ledger um, that was in Elizabeth's handwriting and from one of her own personal books that listed 650 names, claiming that that was her number of victims. Now, if this were true, if she really did torture, mutilate, completely obliterate 650 teenage girls around her area, she would be known as the most prolific serial killer in, you know, the human race as of now, because that is just, those numbers are incredibly high. Now, back to her servants, all of them were actually charged. And it is for the amount of torture, for the amount of accusations. It's hard to say. It's hard to say what is true and what is legend, what is true and what is something you say out of desperation to get a certain level of interrogation to stop, all that kind of thing. Not to mention the fact that she was such a highly ranking woman, and the fact that she was extremely powerful, those all kind of come into play. Now, unfortunately, two of her favorite servants, basically her right and left hand, if you will, the their actual punishment was having each of their fingers ripped off with searing hot pokers, and then they were burned at the stake. Now, two others suffered beheadings, but their bodies were then burned at the same stake. And her final servant, she did have a fifth one lingering around, was given a life sentence, but she herself was a tortured girl turned torturer. So it is said that the courts kind of saw her as more of like a victim, that she couldn't really comprehend what she was doing. Interesting. But Elizabeth herself actually avoided all of those brutal deaths, all of the torturous interrogations, and the courts actually declared her insane and sentenced her to a life in solitary confinement within a wing of her castle. So within her castle, she lived the rest of her days there until August 20th, 1614, 4 years after she was arrested and tried, where she actually died. It is reported that the day before she died, she called out to one of her guards that her hands were feeling very cold. And this guard, said, "Countess, just return to bed, you're fine." Well, she was found dead the next day. Bummer. Her body was buried in an unknown spot. There are talks about her being buried within one of the village's cemeteries, and the villagers having a whole uprising because they're like, how could you bury this sadistic woman within our cemetery? So unfortunately, the her remains and her final burial spot are it's unknown. Now, although her reign of terror and life in general was something out of the darkest horror story, there are some historians who argue her accusations were politically thrived. In Hungary, like I said, she was a very prominent, strong woman for her time with a lot of power at her fingertips. Regardless of whether she was a target for a much larger game. Sorry.
Well, I think it is like if it was like politically driven, did Hungary collapse? Did Transylvania collapse?
So what's interesting is her two of her daughter's husbands were also, I mean, everybody within this family has got power out the fucking yin yang, but they actually, it's rumored, again, another rumor, that they were after the power and the reigning ability that she had. So when she passed, or when she was actually convicted, those separation of power happened, and financial gain for others absolutely happened. So it's interesting because we don't actually know the truth whether or not she was this horrific, um most prolific serial killer, sadistic, torturous, awful woman, whether or not she was actually that or if she was more or less set up. But she was not innocent herself. She absolutely, there are many counts and reportings of how she treated her servants and how she treated the workers within her castle. And the fact that so many young women mysteriously died under her care, it's kind of a toss-up for me personally. Maybe the bathing in blood situation, I could see that it could potentially tie to the epileptic treatment she received as a child.
That's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
That's so crazy that that's what they use for epilepsy.
Yes. There's
Like,
I also read that they would provide a mixture of blood and a piece of skull. Human.
ew.
For what? Like, did it even help?
No, because we don't use that method anymore.
No, I know we don't, but like if it was her treatment and then she continually did it with these like 650 teenage girls, was it like effective for her? I wonder.
No, I think she just got addicted to like wanting blood and the power of taking blood.
Yes.
Yeah.
And inflicting pain. I did relate her to her legend, her lore, the lore around her gives me a very much like Joffrey vibes, in the fact that in the show, in the books, he got a thrill from inflicting pain. And
Mhm.
I could totally see it both sides. I could see it as, oh my gosh, this woman has such high power. You know, like who her husband was, who she was as a person, could have easily been witch hunt-esque for sure. But I think the fact that she had chambers within her castle, that's a little.
Yeah. And I feel like if they were to like search her castle and go in the chambers and there was no torture device at all, then I would feel like that would kind of drop the charges. I feel like if they're trying to say it could possibly have been politically driven, maybe some of the rumors, but they wouldn't have killed four, or did they kill all five?
They killed four of
Four,
them.
and then they left the other one alive for life in prison. So I don't think they would have killed all four if they didn't find some kind of proof. Like I don't think they would have killed them just off of a rumor, you know?
Right.
There has to be some kind of truth to that horrific story.
I know it. And
Ooh.
it's something, when I had first heard about her, I was like early teens, getting into like horror movies and things like that. And it was like the thought of a woman who would literally chain someone up, string them up, and you inflict the amount of pain that she supposedly did. It's straight out of a horror story, you know?
Yeah.
So that is Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess.
Oh, yuck. Well, Brittany, thank you for sharing that very disturbing story
You're
of Miss
welcome.
Elizabeth. Freaking insane. My story today, my monster or lore or legend is the Skinwalker. Now, there's a lot of different interpretations on a Skinwalker, but originally it came from the Navajo Indians in America. And they have a name for it, and I am so sorry if I pronounce it wrong, but it's the Yi Naldushi. So that translates to with it, very roughly, it translates to with it, he goes on all fours. So the Navajo, we all know
Navajo.
that the Navajo have been in America far longer than anyone else. Well, all of the Native Americans, but they've been here longer than anyone else. So their tribes know this land better and also know the creatures that are on this land better than any other culture. So that's kind of something that a lot of people want to scream out and be like, listen to them. They're warning you, they're telling you the truth. You know, this legend is real. And quite a few people have seen it. So let's get into it. Skinwalker. What is a skinwalker? Is it a shapeshifter, a werewolf, an alien? We don't really know. But it is said that it is something that walks on all fours, a man that walks on all fours. So the whole idea of it came from a couple different sources I read about, said that it either came from like witches, male and female and children witches that like dilly-dallied in more darker sources of magic, so to say, were able to transform themselves into animals at any given time. It's not like a werewolf where it needs to be under a full moon. It's nothing like that. That they can transform at any time, back and forth, with no problem. A lot of people were relating it to the owl witch. I don't know how to pronounce her name. It's like La Chula or something like that. But she's the owl witch who transforms into an owl-like creature and steals children in the middle of the night.
Ugh.
So, yeah. But a traditional skinwalker through the Navajo tribe is known as, is known as a shapeshifter. So it's either the witch that transforms, it's a werewolf, some type of creature that is human and animal. Okay. So there's a lot of different legends that go along with it. You're not supposed to speak about it. You're not supposed to try and go and look for it, because that speaking about it even brings its energy closer to you.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
a lot of it's actually very hard to get any kind of information from the Navajos about what this creature actually is, because they not only will not talk to outsiders about it, but they don't want to talk about it because that makes them think that it's coming towards them more, which completely makes sense. I don't know why I'm talking about it, but here we are. Yeah, it's kind of gotten a lot more hype lately in the last few years, with different paranormal teams going to Skinwalker Ranch, which I'll talk about a little bit, in Utah. It's a very prominent area where skinwalkers have been sighted. So it's been talked about a little bit more recently, but you should not talk about them and you should not go and look for them. Those are like number ones.
Didn't you guys see one?
Well, hang on.
Sorry.
And you just take a pause there, little missy. So some of the characteristics of these creatures are animalistic looking creatures, wolf-like looking creatures. So you could mistake it as a werewolf. Or like in Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling had kind of derived a little bit of a skinwalker to create the teacher that would be able to transform, into the werewolf. So you can do a full transformation. Sirius Black, how he can transform completely. But these animals, they have their human instinct and their animalistic instincts, whether they're in human form or animal form. So that means that as humans, they can take on these different identities or these abilities from the animal side. So they have ungodly fast speed where they can run like 200 miles and not get worn out. Their stamina is crazy. And when they're in animal form, they can move around as humans. So that's kind of what's most eerie about them. They also have glowing yellow eyes. Some say glowing red eyes, but where I got most of my sources from was from different blogs from actual Navajos, and they were saying that they're distinctly yellow eyes that are glowing. There is really no way of stopping them, but some suggest that bullets will work, although a lot of stories I was reading said that they shot at them and it had no effect on them at all. And then other stories said that if you dip a knife in white ash, then you can stab them and then they can die. So those are different possibilities, but the reigning kind of idea of it is that they are completely impossible to kill. Not only will you never catch one, but you will never kill one. Okay? So,
Yeesh.
yeah, it's they're pretty creepy. So Skinwalker Ranch, I want to talk about that a little bit. It's gone through quite a few different owners. It's a ranch in Utah, and this family in the 90s bought this ranch, and they had their cattle on it, they were living on it, and very soon after they started living on it, they noticed that a lot of their cattle were becoming mutilated. Just like almost like they were ripped open and just drained of everything, and just their carcass was left there. Now they were like, what is happening to our animals? This is like multiple cattle. It's not just like one cow or anything like that. And the interesting thing was that a site like this should have had blood everywhere. It should have been a complete massacre site. And there is not a drop of blood anywhere. Just completely mutilated cows all over the ranch. So the ranch owner at the time ended up going out, and he wants to try to figure out what the heck is doing this to his cows. And that is where he sees what he has stated as a skinwalker, that it was a wolf or a deer-like creature that ended up standing up on his back legs and watching him, waiting for him to go away. And the one thing that he could distinctly see was the glow of his yellow eyes, watching him back. And as he approached him, he was getting like an unnerving feeling, and he shot multiple times at him, hitting the creature, and it had no effect on him. So of course he like freaks out, takes off. Him and his wife pack up and they move. They sell the ranch to another person. The U.S. government has done extensive research on Skinwalker Ranch, and they're currently doing a show. You guys may have heard of it, and it is called Skinwalker Ranch. So they are trying to figure out what the heck these creatures are, because even after that first family left, the other family that moved in had cattle also, and the same things are happening. So these mutilations keep happening to the animals on the island, on the ranch, and there's no explanation for it at all. There's no tracks that are left. There is nothing. So it is completely unexplainable. Now this has prompted different paranormal people to think maybe it is more of an alien-like creature and not of this world, or that they have interdimensional travel abilities because of how quickly they can disappear out of sight.
Yuck.
And if you guys watch Skinwalker Ranch, I mean, we're like kind of obsessed with it, and it is very interesting some of the things that they're able to see their equipment do. It's wild. Like they have triangulated this triangle in the sky, and they keep trying to shoot stuff into it to try to figure out, is this a portal to another dimension? And then their rockets will go up, and right before they hit it, they malfunction, shoot off somewhere else, or they burst into flames before they hit it. And they've also been able to see anomalies in the sky go towards the triangle and then disappear right behind it, or right in it, and it's open sky. It's like nothing's there. Okay, so that's a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch. You guys, if you haven't seen the show, you should watch it because it's pretty amazing, and I've got my vampire next to me to attest to that. I do want to read a story about a sighting, so I will link the article down in our bio, or like the bio of the video or whatever, because it has 12 different encounters of skinwalkers, 12 different stories, and they're all equally like eerie and creepy and weird, and they all describe very similar creatures. So it's very interesting. But I wanted to read number 4 on the article, which is they ran away on their back legs. Okay. It starts, so this happened about 12 years ago. My family owns a farm in the heart of an Indian reservation. One winter, I was home for Christmas, taking care of the farm while my parents were away Christmas shopping. As I was home by myself, way late in the night, I hear all of our cows freaking out. I knew it had to be the wild dogs that are rampant in our area, so I throw on some boots, grab a shotgun, load it up, and head out to the field. This was a perfect scenario for a horror movie. It was cloudy, but there was a full moon, and it was breaking through the clouds just right to light up all the snow.
Ew.
I ran out into the middle of the field, and just in time, I see 2 dogs. They were standing up, facing each other and fighting. I think, perfect, 2 for 1. So I pump a shell into the chamber of Mr. 12 gauge, and then it happened. The 2 dogs heard the rack, and they both stopped, looked over at me, and ran away on their back legs. Immediately, I froze, and every ghost story about skinwalkers and all the other native legends I grew up with flew through my mind. Keep in mind, I am a white guy, and up until then, these were all just boogeyman stories the native kids like to tell to scare us. That night, they became very real to me.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of people see that they see them running on their 2 legs. Other people see them crouched in trees. So there's one story of a man talking about how he goes out to his field because of the similar situation. He hears his cows freaking out. He thinks it might be a coyote trying to get his cows. So he goes out there, shotgun in hand or handgun, I don't know for sure, but a gun in hand, and he sees this big tree, and he goes up to it, and he's seeing some kind of outlines of multiple creatures in this tree. And he can't really see because it's late at night, but all that he can distinctly see is glowing of multiple sets of yellow eyes staring at him. And he freaks out. He shoots at the tree, and they like fly away or jump away or dissipate somehow. And then they take off running again on their back legs. So what Brittany was saying was, didn't I see one? I don't know. For ever since I had this instance, and I've talked about it before in the UFO episode, I have been wholeheartedly, fully believing that I saw an alien. But with more research, and I think I said it in the UFO episode as well, I don't know if it was an alien or if it was in fact a skinwalker. So at this time I lived in Southern California. I was at my mother's house, and me and my mom are walking up the stairs, and there's 2 large windows at the top of the stairs that look out over a construction site. And we both stop dead in our tracks, staring out the windows, and we see this creature running on its hind legs right across the construction site, and then it just vanished right in front of us. And we were just stunned there for a second, and we looked at each other and we were like, did you just see that? What the heck was that? Oh my gosh, that was insane. And the only way that I can describe it is it looked like a kangaroo on its hind legs, like all the way straight up, but incredibly tall, like 7-8 feet tall kangaroo looking creature with the face of a dog. And it was running faster than I have ever seen anything run in my entire life. I mean, it got from this point of the construction site to this one in seconds. I mean, it was insane. And the interesting thing was that the color of it was the same color as the dirt of the construction site. So in my head, I was like, oh, okay, this is an alien, because there's like a lot of space stuff that happens in that area in Southern California. So I was like, oh my gosh, this has to be an alien. That ship is parked out in the middle of these mountains where no one lives, and it was in town using like a cloaking device, and then its cloaking device was malfunctioning, and it was headed back to its ship, and we were able to see it just for that split second, and then it like must have clicked something and it was able to cloak itself again and then just disappeared. I mean, out of nowhere. So then of course, me and my boyfriend at the time were like, because he was right behind us on the stairs, we were like, we have to go see this creature. So we take up to the construction site like a bunch of psychos, and we are looking around everywhere for this creature. Any sign of it, tracks, broken twigs. I mean, we were looking everywhere, exactly where it was, and there was no sign of anything, no sign of any human, creature, or animal, nothing. And I will say that this was a very early Sunday morning, not very early, maybe like 9 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. There were no construction workers. This part of the neighborhood had not been built yet, so there were no neighbors that were living around there. It was completely desolate, and there was no sign of any creature. I don't know what it was, but it was one of the single-handedly coolest things that I've ever experienced. And I'm really glad that I had 2 witnesses that saw it as well, because then I know I'm not crazy.
Ugh.
Yeah. And that is the little bit of legend of skinwalkers. What are they? Are they only native to America, or are they everywhere? Are they interdimensional? Can they go from dimension to dimension? Are they werewolves, aliens, other unnameable creatures? We don't know, but it is
Are
super
those-
cool.
Are they technically like the creatures you see? One of my favorite guys on TikTok, he does a lot of like funny native stuff, and it, quote unquote, and he
When he says like, I brought my white friends over and they saw the dog, your dog is standing up on 2 legs.
yes,
Yeah.
like things like that. Or he says like, whenever I bring my white friends over at nighttime and they start whistling or things like that, or they like mimic humans. It's the same kind of
Yeah,
creature.
and that goes back to their ability to have their human or animalistic characteristics in either version of their shapeshifting. That's what comes back to the older legend that says they are not this world. They are actually some type of human witches that are able to shapeshift into that. But the type of witchcraft that it is in the Navajo culture is absolutely not allowed to be spoken to any outsider. So there is 0 reporting on it at all.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone's ever going to break that rule, but it's very like, it's unallowed to be spoken about outside of the culture at all. So no one knows outside of the Navajo tribe. No one knows what these creatures actually are, and if they are human, but they do have that capability supposedly to have their humanistic characteristics in their animal form, as walking on 2 legs and speaking as well.
Yikes.
Wild.
Yeah, I don't like that, those whether they are legends or, I totally believe that they could be real.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I believe that if that's what I saw, it was 100% real. And I wholeheartedly believe it. And it does give me like the heebie-jeebies to even be talking about them right now. But I'm doing it as an educational thing, and I'm doing it with the most respect to all scary creatures.
Skinwalkers are like cracking their fingers.
Yeah,
This
they're
bitch.
like, yeah, come outside tonight and bring your trash cans in. We'll see what's up. So
Ew.
It's very cool though. Oh, there's this one really creepy story I read where this guy and their dad are driving down a street, and it's the middle of the night, and they see an older woman on the side of the road, and they pull over and they're asking her if they need help, and she like transforms and takes off running on the two legs.
Yikes!
Yeah, I was like, goodbye. Yeah, pretty
Goodbye.
crazy. Yeah.
It makes me want to stay out of the woods. The woods.
The
Stay out of
woods.
the woods.
Yeah.
Or the
It's-
desert, especially at nighttime.
Yeah, it's mostly on the southwest coast of America, but again, Utah is not very south, so I would say anywhere in the west coast and maybe even anywhere at all.
Yeah.
They've been here for a while, so who knows where they can go. But that is Skinwalkers.
So my monster is Dracula. And Bram Stoker was the one who wrote a novel about Dracula. And his inspiration came from Irish folk stories, more particular like horror stories. And he got a lot of his ideas from different cultures because there's multiple talks and beliefs about vampires in different cultures, and each one has their own way of like how to keep them away from you and how to just go about not having them in your life. In the 1800s in Greece, they were said to think that like redheads were like the ones that were vampires. So they were seeked after to like be murdered so that like they don't get attacked by vampires.
Fucking gingers can never catch a break.
For
Ever.
real.
Jesus.
And then other signs of like vampires, there was like this disease called porphyrium. And essentially, when you have this disease, you're like very pale skin and your gums are like very high up. So it makes your teeth seem so much longer. And obviously, like they can't really be in the sunlight too often because their skin is so pale. So like they could get like extreme sunburn essentially. So they're most commonly seen at nighttime, which kind of gives them like that vampire aspect. And at the time, way back when, anemia was treated by drinking like animal blood. So like that was also like maybe they're vampires instead of like they're sick type of thing.
Okay.
So before he even like wrote about Dracula or anything, he did like tons of research, Stoker. And he actually based his novel from a real person, and his name was Dracula, Prince Vlad III from Wallachia. I feel like I said that wrong. But he was a prince, and he is like considered a hero in Romania. But his nickname was Vlad the Impaler because he was like ruthless. Like he just like went after people and like just was gunning for blood.
Yikes.
Yeah. So like that's kind of creepy, but like that's who he based his story off of. And Irish folklores have a lot of vampires in them. And there's these, they called them fairies at the time, who were very like dependent on either animal or human blood to survive. And like they live in this almost like a parallel world, but they have access to come into our world when they like need their like fuel of blood. so like that could be a vampire as well, if that makes sense.
Are they like little fairies or like human sized?
I don't know.
I wonder.
That sounds really interesting.
Sounds really scary.
Yeah, but Stoker wasn't like the first Irish person to write about a vampire. The first person was actually Sherinda Lefon. I feel like I said that super wrong, but he wrote a novel about Camilla, who was a vampire as well. And like it's just funny that both from like an Irish culture wrote about a vampire existing and like coming to like real life, when they all have like these very common folklores and stories about like these creatures or animals eating humans for like their way of living, like how we can't live without food or water, like they need blood to survive.
Oof. What's always like baffled me is the amount of different cultures all over the world that have pictures or stories about vampires. And not just like, oh, the stereotypical Dracula, he wants to suck your blood.
Yeah.
But like actual people that live in the towns that or the areas that all these different cultures are from, where they know specifically these people will come out at night and drink your blood if you're out. Like that's like what's crazy to me.
New Orleans is like in America anyway, it's known as like the vampire city.
Yeah.
Oof.
But they I know I don't know where exactly this was, but when they would bury their dead, if they were assumed to be like vampire or that they had a fear that they would come back to life, they would stake them. Like dead body staked. Like staked them.
That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be buried. I would prefer to be cremated, but I don't think that if I die, I want a stake in my body.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be how I would want to go.
I think that
If I
would.
became a vicious
Of course you
vampire and only lived and breathed for blood, go ahead and stake me. I think I probably would deserve it at that point. But like Brendan Fraser in The Mummy, don't put me down for mummification. Don't put me down for vampire staking, please.
Yeah, seriously. Unless part of the vampire ritual is that you're going to line my casket with garlic bread and pasta, and then I would gladly take those offerings to the other side. But a stake in my chest, I'm good. That's horrible.
Yeah.
So I wonder, so he impaled. I wonder if that's where Brom got the idea for like a stake in the heart, or if that was like legend throughout different cultures of how to kill them.
That's
Yeah,
an
that's a good
interesting
question.
point.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Because Twilight, you have to rip all their limbs off and burn them. So where the hell did that come from? I mean,
It's Twilight.
whatever that.
Where did Twilight
author's
come from?
Literally, whatever I can't think of her name. That
Stephanie
chick.
Myers.
Ugh, yeah. Wherever she even got the story from at all, she obviously didn't research much about vampires.
Right. It was interesting when you were talking about the white ash and like dipping it in for the specific weapon. Speaking of vampire stuff, in Vampire Diaries, that
Great
show-
sources.
great sources, super super well thought, educated, whatever. Anyway, there's like a certain like the original vampires, like the first ever vampires, the only way to kill them, like a normal stake will not kill them. You have to have a specific dagger, I believe it is, or the white oak stake, white oak ash. Anyway, something to do with white ash penetrating their body, that is a way to kill them.
Weird.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Interesting. Could you imagine like fighting a vampire or like a skinwalker or something, and you grab like a stake, like a regular wooden stake, and you just drive it through them, and you're like, ah, and then they don't explode
like,
or
that
die.
Was cute.
Yeah, they're like
Like ow.
yeah.
I needed a good stretch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, nice try, kiddo, your turn. Like, I can't even imagine what they would do. But I love vampire stories. I think they're so cool to me. Like Interview with the Vampire, The Lost Boys. What's that funny one? that
The one you guys saw.
yeah,
That was so
I
funny.
love that one.
In the shadows or something like that.
Yeah, it's so vampire stuff can be so funny. Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire.
Oh, I
Classic.
hated that one.
Classic.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I love vampire stuff. I
Me
can't
too.
even really think of a type of monster I was ever really scared of as a child. Except
I
like,
know which one you were scared of.
what?
The Grudge.
Oh, that was creepy.
Yeah, but I wasn't a child. I was like a preteen.
How old were you? I was 7.
Yeah, I was like 12 or 13.
Yeah.
You were 7?
Yeah, when I first saw it. It was before I moved to Ohio, so I was 7.
How old was I then? Maybe 11? Not 5 years old.
And my brother used to crawl up the stairs just to scare me.
What a jerk.
Because my room could see the stairs. Like how it was like a little bridge, and he would make the grudge sound knowing I was.
Ew.
Yeah. I was traumatized from The Grudge for weeks after I watched it. Even still, sometimes I'm like, if the corner is too dark, I like watch it. I'm like, are you gonna come out? Or like the way we have to get into the attic at this house. No, thank you. I don't like it.
You weren't safe anywhere in that movie. If you went under your covers, like she could fucking be under there. Terrifying.
Even at the end when she's like on his shoulders.
Did you guys watch
Ew.
like they came out with another movie about like the origin?
No.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
it was pretty creepy.
The when I was little, I guess it was like the like stereotypical boogeyman. That definitely scared me. Or around the same time probably that you saw The Grudge, we watched Darkness Falls. And I'm not kidding. I slept with a nightlight for years after that because I was so terrified. Just even the thought of it, like, no, thank you.
Like just a creature in general that could come and waits for you to turn all the lights off because that's how they get you. Like that is very terrifying.
Yeah,
That
and
is
her
very
whole thing
scary
was
thing.
like, if you screamed, if you made any sound, she would come and get you. Like you'd
No,
be
if
done.
you'd have to look at her. She didn't want you to see her.
I thought it was the screaming.
Mm-mm. It was if you looked at her, then she had to kill you. That's why when she comes to collect your teeth, you're not supposed to look at her. You're supposed to
Look
be
it up
asleep.
because I'm pretty sure it's the scream.
I watched it like a couple years ago. It's not the scream. That's why she's after that guy his whole life, because he gets into the bathroom where the light is until it's daylight. So she can't get him, but he looked at her.
I'm
It was
gonna
like
look it up.
the whole process of it was because she didn't want to be seen because she was like so ugly from a fire.
It doesn't say specifically.
Well, rewatch it and you'll see. She got burned in the fire, remember? And her face was all disgusting and burnt up. So the legend was you cannot look at her, she will kill you. And then he looked at her and he somehow got away into the hallway. His mom sacrificed herself, threw him in the bathroom with all the lights on. The tooth fairy took the mom and like killed her or whatever. Then the cops came in the morning and saved him, and then he stayed inside of light for the rest of his life until he went back to Darkness Falls.
You know what I think I'm confusing it with? Dead silence, because you're not supposed to scream.
Yes. That's where they'll rip your tongue out.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yuck.
And they're like, your whole mouth is all like, ah.
Ew.
I had to look up pictures for the last episode we did where I talked about dead silence.
The one that scared me the most, and it's more popular in like the Spanish culture. His name is, I'm going to butcher it, El Cucuy. And he is said to like take little kids and eat them. And my family thought it was a great idea to tell me that if I didn't behave properly, he was going to come get me. So that was great. He lives in the mountains too.
He lives in the mountains?
Yeah.
Ew.
So mean.
All of the monsters that are like that target children, that's just like the
grow
epitome
up.
of nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
Well, I think because most children are easily scared, so to tell them like a scary story, it's going to be surrounded around.
Taking them.
Yeah.
Snatching them.
Yeah.
Eating them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's gross. I don't know. Again, I will say I'm way more scared of humans than I am of anything monster lore or paranormal. Except The Grudge.
I don't know. There's some like a cryptid creature that's the unstoppable
Unstoppable.
skinwalker. Absolutely not.
They're not gonna attack you. Let them eat
You
your damn
don't
cow.
know.
You don't know. But they seem to run from humans. That's what I'm seeing. The research I saw.
Not my thing. Not
Yeah.
my job. Not my prob.
But anyways, I like how you've taken off half of your blood.
It honestly, from sitting like this, it was coming off, but now it's just, you would understand if you covered yourself with fake blood.
Yeah. It's like you've got like a fox on your nose with like the tail coming up your nose.
Cute.
Yeah.
Cute.
But anyways,
Oh, thank you, Twisted listeners, for tuning in.
yes, thank you so much. And if you were just lucky enough to catch this on YouTube, again, our YouTube is Three Twisted Sisters Podcast, then you got to see us in our beautiful monster lore makeup and Brittany's scary blood face. And if you didn't, thank you so much for listening. We're so excited to have you guys here. If you have any crazy monster lore stories, if you yourself have seen a skinwalker, if you love vampires, or you just have a scary story you want to tell us, we want to hear. Definitely either comment below on our YouTube video, follow us and send us a message on Instagram or TikTok at _3 Twisted Sisters, or send us an email to 3twistedsisterspodcast@gmail.com. We want to hear your stories, so let us know.
Yes. And if you have a tale of, some sort of a legend that an older sibling or your parents told you to try to, keep you behaved, let us know. We would love to hear your spooky tales.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It'd be so good.
And
Woo.
thank you guys for listening again. And we hope you have a wonderful weekend. You take care and
stay twisted.
twisted.
Bye.